Hi, I'm Dave Peterson with Epsilon, and you're listening to the CPG Guys.
Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast. I'm Sri, co-founder and co-host of the CPG Guys, of course, also co-founder and partner of Think Blue Consulting. Your key to unlocking your profitability potential is builders, connectors, and amplifiers. We shape the future of commerce to drive your growth. Please do listen to my older daughter, Ria Raj's music, www.riaraj.com, and a younger daughter, Laura Raj, is a member of the Geffen Records Universal Music Group, Cat's Eye, while my wife, Kavita Raj, has her own podcast, Lights, Camera, Convo, on iHeartRadio and all streaming platforms. Cat's Eye has done its debut, done their first fan event at Staples Center, crossed 1 million followers on TikTok as well as Instagram. And at the time of this recording, they've had sellout tours, both in Manila in the Philippines, Tokyo, and in Seoul, Korea. And they've just got an usher to dance to their hit single Touch on Instagram and TikTok. Enough of that, but joining me today is, of course, my BFF and long-term ally, Mr. Peter V.S. Bond. And when he's not co-hosting this podcast, he serves as Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel, a division of Omnicom that helps enterprise brands improve their SEO and SEM, growing their e-commerce businesses. Mr. Bond, how's Connecticut today?
Sri, Connecticut's great, but I would prefer to talk actually about yesterday, which was New York City, where I had the distinct honor to attend a CPG summit that was being hosted by our friends at Epsilon. I had a start of the day by a little fireside chat. Well, there was no fire, but it was a little conversation I had with our mutual friend, Heather. And we were talking about the state of the industry. And then I hosted a number of panels where we were talking about current issues and challenges that CPG guys faced around data convergence and building audiences and targeting retail media. It was a really wonderful day, some great industry luminaries. And to top it off, one of the attendees that was on my panel is actually our guest on the podcast today. So how about that, Sri?
How awesome is that Heather campaign? She and I got to work together back in the days, formerly known as Johnson & Johnson Consumer, now Kenvue. One of the best shopper marketers that I have come across, really understood sales' vision in terms of delivering both upper funnel, lower funnel, and the full funnel. Very few shopper marketers focus on upper funnel activation. She certainly figured that one out so that it results in lower funnel. So I'll never forget that. It'll be a pleasure to work with her again, but I'm jealous you got to do that and it wasn't me, Peter. But before we get to our guests, we want to ask you to help spread the word about this community we've created in the CPG Guys beyond sharing a podcast with your friends. If you're using Apple Podcasts or Spotify as your preferred listening platform, leave us a rating as it helps feed the algorithm that makes us more findable by CPG retail people like you looking for both education and entertainment. We've always said this is a baseball podcast that also does a little bit of education. We haven't ranted about the Yankees and Dodgers today, but we'll move on. I'll move on today, Peter, because we know it's a World Series that's made to be. You can see I got 99 all over my body. Where's your 42?
I've got a tattoo of that. I just can't show it to you on the air, Sri. That's not, yeah.
All that said, we're happy that the CPG Guys is part of an impressive collection of highly rated podcasts, including CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer, FMCG Guys with Daniel, Efrain, and Christine. All three of us will be attending Grocery Shop this year in Las Vegas. Please do make sure to be there, join us, say hello, drop us a DM, and we look forward to meeting you this year. We're, of course, partnering with Drugstore News on December 4th at the iconic Lincoln Center, my old stomping grounds in New York City, in the annual Issues Summit in its 21st edition. We'll be co-presenting 8 awards at the event in the health and beauty care space to both brands and retailers. If you're interested in being a sponsor, would like to know more, simply drop us a line at contact@cpgguys.com. And in addition, double bonus, we're also partnering with the Path to Purchase Institute on the annual Omni Shopper Award Chicago, November 14th. A select group of winners will feature on the CPG Guys as well. To be part or sponsor, get in touch with us for that one too at contact@cpgguys.com. But links to our podcast, our sister cast, and the social media profiles of my daughter Ria and Laura, my wife's podcast, How to Register for P2PI Live, or the Drugstore News Issue Summit can be found in the digital liner notes of this episode. And now, what we waited for, the main event. Today's CPG landscape, of course, has accelerated a decade in the last 4 years. I say this a lot on every episode. I still remember the famous McKinsey quote in the report they put out in the fall of 2020, indicating this very thing. They said it's accelerated 10 years, and then later on, I think we all calibrated to more like 4. So that happened at the beginning of the pandemic as far as omnichannel retail is concerned. Today, we talked to Dave Peterson, the General Manager, Global Head of Retail Media, Epsilon Retail Media, where he's responsible for unifying the global retail media assets and teams to accelerate retailer and brand adoption of the company's unified retail media platforms around the world. Join me in welcoming Dave to the show. Dave, good morning. Thanks for doing this early with us. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great. It's great to see you, Shri and Peter. Love the time we had yesterday. And I have to say, I heard you in your intro, you talked about Heather. I worked with Heather many, many years ago because I was at Target before joining Epsilon about roughly a little less than a year and a half ago. And I got the pleasure of working with her when she was with J&J as well. And we're just thrilled to have her on the Epsilon team now. So that was fun to hear.
Talk about the energy, right? You throw her a challenge, she's going to go figure it out. I mean, how many shopper marketers do you get that actually are ready for that sales challenge to actually define that path to purchase to what it needs to be today and not like force fit yesterday's? That's what I saw in Heather. It was unique. Thank you for joining us today. We're incredibly excited, needless to say, about speaking with you about retail media transformation, one of our favorite topics on this podcast. And of course, more importantly, would love for the audience to continue to learn. I mean, you're a household name. You've been around a while. I used to tell your team, I was using you guys for database management, email database management back in like 1998 or 1999 when I first started working on Pepsi. And you guys are the highest email database that existed on planet Earth at that point. It was a whopping 20,000. And 20,000 meant elite back in the days. Of course, everything's changed, and that's why we have you back, Dave. So thank you for that summary. Before we get to the detailed questions, can you take a quick minute to tell us about Epsilon and then your specific role there?
Yeah, right. So that was fun to hear the story around the email piece. We've evolved the business tremendously since those days, from email into a whole suite of different solutions that serve across, identity, data, ad technology, and messaging, et cetera. So business has come a long, long way over the years. My particular role, Shri, is I lead up the retail media side of the business. And so that's made up of, a full platform that includes our on-site capabilities with the acquisition of CitrusAd back in the middle of 2021, with all of the off-site capabilities and data and identity that Epsilon brings, and really bringing those together in one unified platform. And then obviously we have the team and services behind that. And so, I'm honored to lead this group and really think about how does that apply to the future of retail media, not just for the retailers, but also obviously for the advertisers, because you need it to work on both ends of that. And let's not forget the consumer in the middle of that equation.
Well said. Let's not forget the consumer, because that's actually going to be my first question. But before that, thank you for the summary. A reminder to those listening and watching, in the digital liner notes of this episode, we'll of course place links to Dave's LinkedIn profile, the company's LinkedIn page, and of course the company's website as well. That way, while y'all are listening, you can easily connect back straight from your smartphones, as most of you normally do. So question number one, as I said, really anchored around the shopper. It's been a while since we've had Epsilon on the CPG guys. What's new? What's up? You mentioned citrus ads. What's changed? How has retail media for you guys evolved, especially if you put the shopper, the consumer in the middle of it all, and that is the backdrop?
Yeah. A lot has changed, right? Even before I came into the business. But I think we'll just focus on just what's changed over the course of the past year and a half. We in March announced Epsilon Retail Media at Shop Talk, and really the bringing forward the advancement of the first retail media platform to bring AI and couple that with person-first identity right at the point of ad serving. And that's a huge step forward for us as we continue to unify our platform, not just through UI and connecting the on-site Citrus ad piece with Epsilon's offsite, but really connecting that with identity and AI across those two pieces. So big step forward for us as we evolve into what is now Epsilon retail media across all of that. And when we talk about unified platforms, Sri, we think of it not just as on-site, off-site, or in-store. Those are channels, obviously, to reach consumers and shoppers. But we really think about unified being unified by the person and going at it person first. Because, as you know, we're shopping not only in-store or online. We're shopping across all of these channels and more, sometimes simultaneously. And so how do you deliver a unified experience? You have to know who your consumer is, have one view of that consumer, and be able to speak to them wherever they are at the right time. So that's our focus. And I would say as we announced that, we really kind of put this into three key pieces. Number one is a honest solution, and that's tied to our identity, which is not just on digital IDs or hashed emails, but really going down to name and address so we can really identify unique individuals and have persistency in that ability to reach, identify and reach them. The second piece is smarter. That's where the AI piece comes in, and that's the ability to not only make decisions in real time, what ad to serve to whom and where and when, but also who's the audience we should be going after based on the advertiser's objectives, and helping, rather than manual means of creating audiences, have an automated way to do that based on data and both history and real-time signals. So that's the other piece. And then the third piece is like how we work with our partners. And that's what we call complete yet flexible. So we can work in a way that connects on and off-site across all the entire platform for a retailer to serve their brands and reduce some fragmentation. Or in some cases, they can leverage us on certain parts of that solution to help amplify or improve maybe some of the capabilities that the retailer's bringing to market already. So that's a lot, but that's really what we've been up to over the course of the last 18 months.
Thank you, Dave. Welcome. Good to see you again. I know it's been a hot minute, well, less than 24 hours, but still, I hope everything's been going well for you in that time. It was just such a great conversation yesterday, and such an honor for me to be a part of it. In today's volume challenge environment for CPG brands, and I heard this yesterday in spades, reach is very important, right? You talked about creating audiences, and especially about lost households that have been lost to loyalty, changes that have been primarily driven by the rise of, private label as a result of pricing that's happened in the marketplace. How do you help brands solve for the reach issue using the solutions you've kind of outlined?
It's a great question, and you're right. We did talk a lot about that just yesterday. But when I look at it, there's a lot of things that retail media brings in terms of its promise. There's a lot of opportunities or problems that retail media is here to solve for. But for me, if I had to pick one, it's reach, and it's reach of unique individuals, not just impressions. And so that, to me, if you can solve that piece, right, that drives the performance that advertisers are looking for to grow their customer base, whether that's getting them back into the category or brand, acquiring new shoppers, or continuing the relationship with those shoppers. So reach is number one for performance. It's also number one for efficiency. Because if you don't know who you're reaching and you can't assure that you're reaching real people or individuals along the way, that can lead to some problems when it comes to either missing out on reaching people that are ready to buy your products, or over messaging people and giving them a poor experience along the way. So reach is number one for me. I think when you step back and look at the industry today, what's causing some of the problems with reach, there's a couple pieces of that. And these aren't necessarily meaning that things are broken. I just think there's opportunities to make it better. So when you look at, in some examples, the retailers own data. Not every retailer has their data in the best place. So, there's ways in which we work with retailers to improve their own customer files. In some cases, it's about identifying and removing duplication, where they might have, two people in their file. It's actually one, right? Or two IDs in their file is actually one. It's also helping them identify shoppers that are transacting with them, but maybe aren't in their loyalty program, or they're not identifying and adding to their customer file to help grow that file. So I think that's one piece of it on the retailer side, that we're really focused on to help them reach more customers. But the other piece of it too is, even for those that have great first party data and it's all clean and they've captured the majority, if not all of their shoppers, we see in the industry as, you have more and more ad tech partners and data partners and handoffs of that data from the point of building an audience to the point of activating and measuring against that audience. We see like a loss in data fidelity there, right? So, and sometimes you're attaching real people to digital IDs, and that can create some problems in terms of maybe multiple IDs per person and things like that. So that's what we see happening in the industry today. What we are really focused on how we solve for that is really around that strong identity. So we have an identity solution called Core ID. Some know about it, some don't. But essentially what that does is it's resolved to name and address, and it's verified by transactions. And so that removes the potential, like I'll just use myself as an example. I have 3 email addresses, personal. I've got my phone, I've got my tablet. So Peter has multiple, would you say? 6? So what that could result in is potentially 5 separate IDs that advertisers are messaging to that's really just one person. And so that's why we take it down to that next level of how do you take those and resolve that to individuals at name and address. So that's one piece that we're doing there. And then the second piece is, how do you connect that into the activation side? And so maintaining that as a unique provider that has the data, has the identity, but also can onboard that data into digital is very unique for us. So we don't lose that data fidelity throughout. And ultimately, if you're doing that, that enables a couple things, right? It enables us to understand exactly how much of an audience are we reaching? Is it all of it? We can guarantee that we can reach all of it based on budget and time, because we can see each of those unique reaches. And it also helps us manage frequency, because we know that each ad's going to one unique individual. So big piece there when it comes to reach. On the identity side, I'll add one other piece to the reach. You also have to look at where you're looking to reach those individuals. And I think in our industry, we sometimes maybe restrict a little bit too much, and we're starting with platform first versus person first. And that means that at some point in your campaign, that person might not be on those properties, but they might be somewhere else that's also brand safe and relevant, and you're missing opportunities to reach them. And so we look at a open web and media ecosystem that's much more scalable and much more apt to find those people.
I like the concept of the core ID. You mentioned reach several times. I think in today's volume challenge times, when brands have had a lot of exits of households, the importance of a core ID and being able to reach a cohort of households or a given household is actually very important. And one such thing for brands, as they reset inflationary prices, as they put out new innovation, new package sizes to test out what the opening price points could be, again, in this inflationary challenged environment, is new to brand consumers. Can you talk a little bit about how the core ID can help brands actually target new to brand, bring new to brand, etc.?
Yeah, I think the concept's roughly the same, Shri. And so the principle applies is you can't acquire new people into your brand if you don't know who's already buying and who's not buying. And so it really does come right back down to that core ID and also the data behind that, whether that's within a particular retailer or across retailer, to be able to say, yes, this person is this one unique individual is a current customer versus this is somebody who is not buying. And so if you don't have the right, proper identity, you can't properly acquire those customers. And we've actually done some testing around this. So this isn't just philosophical, this is real, where we have passed a retailer's audience onto another buying platform that's not tied to our identity. And we're able to measure back by tagging to say how much of that intended audience is actually being reached. And it's sort of surprising. In one case, we saw only 15% of the intended audience was actually reached in that scenario. That means 85% of the impressions or 85% of the people weren't reached. So when you're thinking about bringing new products to market or trying to acquire new people, you're potentially messaging people that are already in buying your brand, right? And that translates all the way back into conversion, because on that same test that we did, we saw 63% of the impressions going against people outside that audience. So a lot of impressions going on there. And then we saw only 7% of the conversions happening on the people outside of the intended audience. So think about the power if all those impressions would have gone instead of 85% instead of reaching 85% outside the audience to reaching all the people in the audience, that conversion rates would have gone through the roof. So I think that's important. But again, when you come to new people, if you don't know who they are and you can't deterministically know whether they're buying your products or not, you can't properly acquire new customers.
That's solid, Dave. So let's get to the heart of what your responsibility is at Epsilon, which is retail media. We talk about it frequently here on the podcast, every once in a while, right, Shrey? So we'd like to know from your perspective, what's new around retail media specifically at Epsilon, what changes have taken place, and any particularly new partnerships that you want to highlight that CPG brands can leverage from an activation and measurement perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot to cover on this one as well. I think I've been in this retail media space for now probably 15 years, close to that. So I've seen a big change in the progression here. Back from the early days when it was very much just a direct retailer to partner relationship or advertiser relationship, working with sometimes the retailer shopper marketing teams or sales teams directly. I've seen that change over time where there's a lot of really good expertise coming in across specialty agencies that are setting up retail media practices, even within the different holding companies. Obviously, we're part of Publicis Group, but it goes beyond Publicis Group in terms of specialty agencies that are standing up. And so that we've gone also from that in terms of partnering just with retailers to also on behalf of our retail partners working with those agencies. So that's one area I've seen changing and evolving and how we're working there. There's been a huge change, and this isn't brand new, but the importance of demand partners, aggregators, and specialty folks that are activating specifically for retail media for brands on retail media. So aggregators like PackView Sky and Flywheel, right? We work with Flywheel as a partner as well. So for us, we need to be plugged into the industry and work with these experts and these partners to help deliver better opportunity for the retailers and better results for the advertisers that ultimately are working through our platform. So that's one other piece I would say. I say that said, there's also so many people coming into the space that's resulting in, I think, some fragmentation, just to be real, right, on a couple levels. And this is maybe a lean into where things are going, but there's been a crazy influx of retailers getting into this space. And I think that's creating challenges for CPG, for advertisers in terms of how do I work with all of these retailers? What can we do as an industry to make that easier? that's one piece that I think is yet to be solved, but needs to be solved. And then even on the tech side, data and tech side, there's so many new players and entrants into that. That's creating sort of a fragmented technology and data stack that retailers are bringing together that can result in loss of data fidelity and ultimately ability to reach. And so how do we help retailers? And this is something we are doing with the unified platform, is how do you help retailers connect all of those pieces or bring one unified platform to the table to help make sure we can see from the time an audience is created to the time they purchase online or in store, we can see with one vision all the way through that. So some of those problems yet to be solved in full, and some of those we're actively working on.
Let me remind the public that today I'm speaking with Dave Peterson, General Manager, Global Head of Retail Media at Epsilon. So, Dave, speaking to that very core ID, the consumer, everything you've discussed so far in terms of how at the household level a brand could work with y'all to really hyper target and super target, whatever the right word is. There, at the last time I counted, there are 64 retail media networks in the US. I'm not talking just food and bev and grocery, but also general merchandise and department. That number changes every day. It's only going to go up and up and up. The omnichannel world is 24/7, 360 in terms of how she connects, she shops, where she discovers, where she browses. Shopping baskets are fragmented. How can you help a brand build one consistent view of that consumer through this core ID that you discussed, showing her connections, not just one place she shops, but if she's 360, she's 24/7, and it's fragmented, kind of capture cross-channel?
Yeah, it's a great question. We know that marketers want to know how she connects, how she shops, and so forth, and when and where is she transacting. That's absolutely ultimately what marketers are trying to get to, because that's what's going to help make any connection point, message, content relevant to that consumer. It's also going to help advertisers know that they're getting the most out of each of all their media or advertising dollars. So I think that's a great question. It's interesting. I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but it comes down to a couple elements. And again, it starts with one view of that customer first, and that comes back to core ID and identity. It comes back to, again, the ability to take that data, first-party retailer data, connected to one individual consumer, which comes down to that name and address, versus connecting it to digital IDs or hashed emails, which could be, as I said earlier, multiple IDs per individual. So one view is super important, but then as important of that is the execution side of it. So how do you have the ability to see them across all these channels, or we call it one vision across all those channels, and then speak to them in one voice? Because if you can do that, you can actually you don't have to create a message by platform. You can create a message by person and speak to them in one voice, wherever they are. So that's kind of a construct or the vision in which we are operating under at Epsilon, and how we're bringing that forward in retail media. But let me speak to the execution piece, because this is where, Peter, we talked a little bit about this yesterday on AI. Now, AI is in its early days, but it's not new at the same time. So predictive AI, machine learning has been around. I think how we apply that into this space is the key. And how do we build more trust as an industry to let the machines do some of the work? Now, I think the people need to stay at the top in terms of strategy. What is the governance around how we use AI to do what's right for the consumer in the end, right? So that piece has to stay. But how do we also at the same time allow AI to do what it's best at? And this, when you said 24/7, 360, I'll give you a couple examples of what we see in the industry and how AI can solve for that. Number one is a lot of the execution is manual. So let's talk about how we build audiences today. We build audiences by, we have an advertiser, we have an objective, we have a set of a customer file or a set of people in which we can choose from based on that objective. And we manually create audiences based on demo, purchase history, all kinds of things. That's not terrible, but that can take not only days, but weeks before it actually gets built and deployed. And in those weeks, consumers may have purchased the item. Consumers may have not purchased the item, but now need to be targeted and they're left out. And I think I always say this, by building a segment, you're doing two things. You're including people that don't care in that segment, and you're excluding people that do care. Because as humans, we don't know, but machines can learn based on history, real-time signals, propensity to buy models, can actually build audiences faster and more real-time for us to help make sure that we are including that consumer in our audience selection. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we put a lot of rules when we build out our marketing programs. And this is where the 24/7, 360 and channels comes in, right? And two examples is we build time-based rules. We want to reach them during this time. We don't want to reach them during that time. Well, guess what? In the 24/7, 360 world, shoppers are ready anytime, and machines can identify when that right time is, and we're excluding that opportunity, I think, as an industry. So that's an area I think AI can help. We also restrict properties. Hey, now we only want to reach them in brand safe environments, but AI can adjust for that. But we also put sort of parameters around placement first versus person first marketing. AI can actually overcome that and say, well, I can open up the places in which to reach these people that increases my opportunities to reach them. And whereas if we do it manually, right, we're restricting the opportunity to find some of these consumers that are ready to buy our product. So I think when I think about 24/7, 360, connecting to her when she's ready to be connected to, when she's ready to buy, I think that's where good data combined with AI can open that up and truly deliver omnichannel view, if you will, or experience. So I went off on that one, but that's some of that is future looking, but the capability is here today and we have it. It's just how do we move into that future?
I don't feel you went off on that one because, again, I'm relating it back to practitioner challenges, which is getting households back today. Finding new to brand households is the name of the game, right? But then I'll also use the word that you said you went off, and I'll turn it over to Peter. I think the very next question, Peter, we need to focus is actually data paralysis.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, Sri, we talked a lot about that yesterday in New York City. The brands were pretty vocal about the fact that they have access to enormous amount of data. The problem is, what is the right data that I need to build a relevant audience of the consumers I really should be trying to approach? So my question to you is, how does Epsilon, from your perspective, Dave, really help leverage your data, a manufacturer's data in combination to figure out what is the right data to build the most appropriate audience at scale?
That's a great question. I think so. There's a couple things that I see here is there's a lot of great data sources. There is, to your point, more data out there than I think we can actually use in some cases. But then there's data that's out there that we're not actually applying in this space. And so I look at it this way. I think, right, retailers have great first-party data. They know things that many other marketers or CPG don't know, right? When they're buying, how they're buying, how often they're buying, and also, what else are they buying? But it's all in the context primarily of within their retail environment, right? It's online and in store, but they don't really have insight into what's happening outside of their walls, so to speak. At least to a large degree. There might be some data they have, but largely it's within the walls of that retailer. Well, I don't know about you, but I have a life outside of the retailers I shop at. In fact, I don't shop just at one retailer. I shop at many, some more than others, absolutely. But I think as a CPG, as an advertiser, the question is, how can I get more insight into what those consumers' interests and lifestyle preferences are, things of that nature, so I can be even more relevant for them. And frankly, that also feeds into AI models too, by the way, in terms of who's more apt to buy their product. So I think one of the things that we're doing is we have a lot of data tied to our identity. And when we work with retailers, we're able to bring that data together with the retailer data to sort of round out what we know about those consumers or what the retailers know about those consumers. And that can be pretty powerful when it comes to an advertiser and a marketer that's trying to really deliver relevant messages to the right audience. They might not be buying a product at a retailer. And so the retailers say, well, they're not buying that product, but we have other data that would suggest they're interested in that. And so that's how you can help close the loop, if you will, on the reach of that consumer to get them to buy in that store. So that's one piece. I think the other part of your question was around what I read into it is a lot of the CPGs have a lot of their own data. And this isn't new. This is happening. But I think there's a opportunity to figure out how this becomes more scaled in our industry. And that opportunity is sort of data sharing within a clean room environment. And that can be pretty powerful, where a CPG knows certain things about a consumer, the retailer knows certain things. Bringing that data together is pretty powerful when you get into co-branding, co-marketing, acquisition on the retailer side, acquisition on the CPG side. The problem I see is it's not scalable. It's hard to work with. It comes back, to be honest, to what I talked about earlier, is we then take that and try to put that into manual execution methods, and things start to fall apart.
Yeah, Dave, one thing I heard yesterday was that from some of the manufacturers that they have disparate data sets, and even inside their own house, they have a problem aligning the data, and you work to help them converge that data for the purpose of connecting it to the identity and then partnering with external data sources to really drive the audience creation. Am I getting it right that way?
That's exactly right. And again, that data is great. There's two things, right? The data is great, but if you can't tie that to an individual and to a household, then it's less effective, and in fact could be used in a wrong way or can facilitate irrelevant ad to a consumer. So that's one thing. And then, I talked a lot about AI. AI is as good as the data and the identity that it's leveraging. So these things all have to work in concert. And that's why I'm so focused on this in this conversation. That's where we're putting all of our energy. It's really the history of what Epsilon's been built on. And it just makes 100% sense that this applies into retail media, because this is why we're all leaning in, is because of the relationship ultimately with that shopper. And you need to be able to make that, improve their experience, improve relevancy for them, and that will translate into sales and return on ad spend.
Dave, in speaking to your teams, I learned that you have exciting new capabilities, and our listeners would love to hear what those are, especially as we've been chatting about the shopper, the household, targeting, hyper-targeting, cleaning up data paralysis, helping brands with their own 1P data. What's cooking?
Yeah, so you know what? Again, focusing on that number one priority of reach. So there's a couple things that we are in process that we've rolled out and in the process of rolling out. And I'll talk to them in the on-site and off-site just for simplicity. But, there's also the opportunity of how do you reach more of the shoppers when they're in the retail environment. So we've invested a lot on our on-site portion of the platform with regard to, improve keyword intelligence and automation to scale the sponsored product ads, which is still a very, very important part of retail media. So I don't see innovation dying there by any chance. So that's one thing. We've also enhanced and brought forward new display and now a video capability so that marketers can work with retailers to communicate to shoppers in different ways, right? And the power of video, I think, is something that is too long of a wait for us to see come forward in this space. So I'm excited to see where that goes. The other piece that I'm really excited about, and we'll be talking more about this in market, is we've launched an opportunity and a way for us to help retailers enhance their customer file. So I talked a lot about some of the issues with duplication or missing out on the ability to identify and grow their customer file. that enables marketers to reach more shoppers and reach and drive more effective advertising. And so we are launching that. We've been running that across a couple of our partner retailers, and we'll talk more about that. It's coming soon. But essentially what it's doing is we're seeing in one end, when we talk about growing customer files, what we're doing is we're able to see transactions happening online in store that aren't being identified and added to the retailer's customer file. We're seeing anywhere from a 2 times to 8 times increase on the customer file size. And we know that those are uniques because we're tying them back to identity, right? The core ID. So that's really impactful, not just on reach, but then you're able to actually attribute more of that advertising back to understand the true performance of that ad spend. So that's a big, big announcement we're bringing out. And again, it isn't about the placement. I talked a little bit about that earlier. That's important. But if you don't have the identity, you don't have the scale of reach, the placements aren't as effective and you don't understand how they're working for you. So we're really excited about how we're leaning in there on the data side.
Those are some terrific announcements, Dave. Really helpful to both sides of the equation, the advertiser and the publisher. So it's good that Epsilon's contributing to the ecosystem in that way. The ability to target consumers is so absolutely paramount. I was joking yesterday on our panel about the fact that there are people who are still somewhat suspect of the power of retail media. And I remind them that for the better part of 50 years, their primary targeting mechanism has been females 18 to 24. How efficient is that? So I think we all need to realize that the mousetrap you're building now is far and away better than what we've had for the better part of the last half century. So let's look to the future, because you've got a great platform, you've invested, you're announcing new things, but I know you're not done there. Like, when you start thinking about where you want to take the retail media capabilities of Epsilon, what are you betting on right now, particularly as it relates to AI and how it can be applied against building better outcomes for brands advertising through retail media?
I think there's a few elements. Some of these I've maybe touched on a little bit earlier, Peter, but I think number one, I see a future, and it's already playing out, but we could do better in terms of retail media has often been thought of just a lower funnel tactic, which I think is why it's been so much on-site versus like audience. And I think it's also not gone into the off-site and audience targeting because of some of the data issues we've talked about that we're solving for. So I do think that retail media is going to move into more upper funnel. And that isn't to say that it's going to take upper funnel dollars and push those into lower funnel tactics. I think it's us using our data and identity upper funnel to make the upper funnel, so it's called like connected TV, even more efficient and more effective in terms of who it's reaching, in terms of households, and then measurable.
But Dave, I think you'd probably agree that requires adjusting KPIs, and it requires expectations around outcomes to differ, right?
Correct. Yes, absolutely. I don't think exactly. I think that what the data can do is help be more effective in its targeting and more effective in its measurement. And so I think it adds an element of relevancy and effectiveness to those channels. But there's other KPIs those channels are delivering on that need to. You don't want to change that. You just want to make it more effective. And I think that's where I see it going there. The other piece, I think, is we will see, and I talked about this, the industry largely isn't there yet, but we will see AI change how media, retail media especially, is planned, bought, and measured. And it's going to be much better because our people then can be more focused. And when I say our people, I talk about the people operating retail media, right? Whether it's on the advertiser side or the retailer side, can be more focused on strategy, more focused on the governance and being putting things in place that are right for the consumer, and then let the machines do the actual execution of that. Again, I put that in a future bucket because while we're doing that for some of our partners, it isn't largely at scale in the industry. There's still a ways to go there. And then I think the third piece I would add is, I think with Shri, I think you quoted there were 64 retailers, retail media networks, and that's growing almost daily, right? So I think there will be a future not too far out where a lot of the smaller retailers who are in it now, but also not in it, will come together in a more aggregated or syndicated marketplace type of a play that will make it easier for advertisers to reach consumers across multiple retailers and measure the results across that span of retailers in a much more efficient way. So there'll be a place for individual retailers to continue, but I think there'll also be that opportunity that'll come to market at some point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I think that those small regional individual retailers will most likely see activation as part of a larger association and not so much from one-offs the way you see in traditional brick and mortar kind of activation. They're not going to be, because the amount of effort it takes to execute a campaign for one of those small regionals is about as much as for a big national. And so they're just not going to garner that kind of attention unless they plug themselves into a larger ecosystem that gives national reach for campaign activation. I couldn't concur more.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that, Peter. I think there's an and element there. I think there's a limit to how far they can scale, right? And that's where the marketplace or sort of working together collaboration will help them scale. I do think, though, they have their own sort of relationships and markets and, whether that's shopper marketing specifically. I think that's where the retail media will stand on its own for those small folks, but it'll be more in the sense of like, hey, we want to do this at at these locations at this time within, a particular retail initiative that they're running, seasonally or what have you. So I think there'll be a little bit of and going there, but it will open up more scale for them to reach into more.
Yeah, I think the and will definitely manifest more on the lower funnel aspect of activations, but to get those big brand dollars and be part of the upper funnel awareness and discovery, I think that's where the power of a larger network is going to really come to bear.
Awesome. Let me remind our audience you can find all of our content by simply going to a web browser and typing cpgguys.com as the URL. If you think you or your company has thought leadership to contribute to our ongoing community discussion, you can drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Easy, contact@cpgguys.com. And maybe you can join us on the podcast like Dave did today. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the top navigation bar. The rating tells us how we're doing. The review tells us whether we're having the right conversations with the right folks. To our followers on LinkedIn, the show doesn't exist without you. Thank you for the DMs. Thank you for the clicks, likes, messages, the follow, and also meeting with Peter and me at conferences and wanting to be out there and be part of transformation in this industry. Dave, thank you for making time early morning to do this with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shri. Thank you, Peter. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you guys out and about as we get into grocery shops coming up. So I'll see you there and looking forward to where we go from here.
First and foremost, I loved how Dave articulated Epsilon's focus on their platform about delivering honest solutions tied to identity, being name and address, being smarter about making decisions in real time. He talked a lot about time-based rules on audience creation. And being complete and flexible in their work with partners to reduce fragmentation. I really like the fact that the focus on reach as opposed to impressions really comes down to individuals, right? You need to get to that name and address so that you can deduplicate the likelihood of reaching the same person thinking that they're different personas, but they're really all just the same identity. The fact that retailers really don't have always clean and usable data and work needs to be done. And one of the announcements they made is that they're really trying to help retailers clean up their data and identify those shoppers that may not be part of their loyalty program. And the fact that in doing so, that they can actually increase the number of customers in their loyalty program between 2 and 8 times. I mean, that is phenomenal work. The core ID is at the essence of Epsilon's solution. Resolving name and address is critically important. We talked a little bit, I know, in the question you asked about new to brand, Dave really articulated that you can't really measure new to brand if you don't fundamentally understand who's already buying your brand to begin with. So identity is so paramount to drive efficiency in this marketplace. They're very focused on building a consistent view of the customer through core ID. It starts with the core ID and identity, but execution is equally important. They have one vision around that. They want to speak to consumers in one voice, and that's why, again, identity resolution is so critical. That AI is being applied to execution requires, while there is governance associated with it, the power of AI is letting it do its work and expanding out the ability to really identify. I love the fact that you don't want to miss any opportunities as you're building audiences and where you can reach them. The fact that because manual creation of audiences is slow, it leads to the condition where the data is old and you end up including people who don't care and excluding people who do care. I think that's so, I can't emphasize that enough, how AI is going to fundamentally transform audiences. Audiences can get stale very quickly. Like the example I used yesterday, I used the example of a television, but the truth can be said about, we had someone there from Thermacell who sells products that help reduce mosquitoes in the backyard. If you build an audience and it turns out that in the time between the data that you had and the time you serve up the ad, they actually bought some kind of a mosquito system to address it, guess what? You've missed it for the whole season. You just served up an ad to someone who isn't relevant. I mean, that's just a really great example. By the way, thanks to Suzanne Ayub from Thermacell for helping articulate that in our panel yesterday. Great new products they're bringing to bear around display and video capabilities through Epsilon, and just so many great things. But looking towards the future, the fact that retail media needs to be seen as a full funnel mechanism, as far as if you still exist, the funnel, whether or not you believe the funnel still exists in a linear format, the point is that retail media addresses all aspects of engaging consumers, and we're going to see retail media through the use of AI massively improve how retail media is planned, bought, and measured. And what's going to also happen looking towards the future is consolidation or association of alliances between retailers is going to allow brand advertisers to efficiently execute full funnel retail media advertising at scale, and through identity resolution, being able to very accurately measure the performance marketing of those campaigns.
Power-packed episode. Excellent summary. I think for today's volume challenge times, focusing, everyone who's a practitioner on the brand side talks to me about, I need to get my households back. Well, here you go. Here's one way. With that, that's a wrap of this episode. See you soon on the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.